Friends, welcome to Trishtech Institute, and in today's episode we will be discussing about OpenSUSE high availability cluster package, that is PaceMaker. And today's topic is how you will prepare your cluster nodes. So in this tutorial video we will be discussing about how you will configure the local file systems and what all things you will need to keep in mind while preparing the infrastructure, then how you will configure the networking, then time synchronization for the cluster nodes, and how you will do the name resolution and user management. And also we will be discussing about the software management and how you will update the cluster nodes. So let's move ahead with the local file systems. So in local file system, first thing you need to keep in mind that you should not have a single point of failures. And if you know that local file system is your like locally attached hard disk, so if you are using single hard disk, you are putting a single point of failure in your server, so you need to mitigate that. So to mitigate that, you should configure RAID, and also just not to configure RAID. Here RAID means I am telling RAID 0, so that will have a striping. So instead of that, you should go ahead with RAID 1 or RAID 5, where you will have some kind of redundancy and you will mitigate the single point of failure. Also you need to monitor the local RAID for any failures so that you get an alert. And also you can consider using BTRFS or ButterFS for your root file system, which allows you to have a rollback facility. So every time you make some changes in your root file system, it will take a snapshot so that you can roll back to that snapshot later if required. Now this is, you need to keep in mind, is not a replacement for test environment, where you should not think like, okay, I don't need the test environment to test all the changes there and then implement to production. You always need to have a test environment. And you need to keep in mind one more thing, that BTRFS snapshots tends to fill up your root file system, so you should keep an eye on that. You should not fill up your root file system, else you will be in a deep trouble and you may have an outage. So try to clean up that periodically, and for that, if possible, put a disk space monitoring. So most of the production environment has some enterprise level monitoring agents installed on them so that they can be centrally monitored. So have that, and always add a disk space usage so that you can clean it up well before it fills up. Now moving ahead with the preparing the infrastructure. So for preparing infrastructure, you need to keep in mind why this is required, because this is the key element to have a successful cluster deployment. So in the infrastructure, few things you need to keep in mind, like you need to have a special attention on the networking part, then local file systems, already we have discussed on that, then some services like time synchronization and name resolution, and also the software management, like how you will maintain a uniform software base for all the nodes and how you will update them. So for the cluster networking, in this section you will have to keep in mind few required networks are there, like storage network. In storage network, either you can have an Ethernet for iSCSI, or you can have a fiber channel for SAN. So that is for storage, and then you will have another network that's called client facing network. So in client facing network means this is the network will be used for all the services to consume by the client. Now also you should have something network for your Ethernet power switches. Now if your power switches have that option to connect them through network, then only this will come into picture, else it is not a mandatory requirement. Now next network is heartbeat network. So cluster uses heartbeat to sense the status of other nodes or all the nodes in the cluster. So for that it uses the heartbeat. So in previously what we used to do is to design heartbeat network on a separate network. Now there is some problem. Instead of that, if you use the same client network, means which network you are using to access the services on the cluster nodes, then what happens if there is any failure in the link, it can sense actually. But if you are using a separate network to have a heartbeat only to use that, you may not be able to detect this failure on the client network, because if your client network is down, still your heartbeat network is up, so cluster will think like your cluster nodes are functioning properly and it will not try to mitigate that. So try to use your heartbeat network on the same network which is used by clients to connect to the server, so that you can detect a failure in that. Now after that, whatever you do for cluster, you always keep in mind to have a redundancy. That's what I was telling you, should always try to mitigate single point of failure. So what are all places you need to look into? So first thing, you need to look into the switches, so network switches, then power supplies. So there also you can have a single point of failure, so try to have redundant power supply. Then network cards, so NIC cards. Then rack power, even rack power can also be a single point of failure, so your rack should be getting power from multiple source. So here what you need to keep in mind, whatever you have in your infrastructure or in your cluster landscape, if it exists, you have to have a redundancy in that, else you are putting or leaving a single point of failure. So now moving ahead with network bonding. So why bonding we need in the network space? So you can use single NIC card and you can configure the IP address on the NIC card and start using that, right? So instead of that, why you need a bonding? Because bonding aggregates multiple network interface into a single logical interface. Now what happens if you are using single interface only and directly configures that, and if some hardware issue happens or some link failure happens in that particular interface, then your entire network is down. But if you are configuring bond, instead of one NIC card, you will have multiple NIC cards, and those NIC cards will have multiple separate links. So now if one link goes down, still you have another link up, so your network will be still accessible. So you will not have a network outage until unless all the links are going down, which has less probability. So you are removing the single point of failure. So this bonding provides you hot standby and load balancing options. So hot standby means if you are going with a two NIC card, one is active and one is passive. So in that case, if active goes down, automatically you switch over to the passive one and that becomes active. So your high availability you are having in your network space. And load balancing means, suppose you have two NIC cards, so each are like 10 Gbps link. So instead of using single as a 10 Gbps, as you aggregate both of them, now you have a 20 Gbps link, so you are getting more bandwidth. And also you can have some kind of load balancing. Okay, your NIC 1 is highly utilized, so next traffic will be going via NIC 2, so that it doesn't make only NIC 1 highly loaded. So that options you get from bonding. So bonding modes are there, so that specifies a bonding policy. Like one example you can have, as I was giving you, like active backup. So in that case, one only slave is active, so now you may have two slaves under the bond device. So here slaves means nothing but the underlying physical NIC cards. So each NIC card, they say like one slave for your bond device. So in active backup, what happens, one will be active, rest of them will be passive, and a different slave only comes into picture when it becomes active. So active one goes down or fails. So until unless current active one is failing, your other slaves will not be working as a active one. And this configuration you can do using YAST, or even you can do it manually. So I will suggest to use YAST because that gives you proper network wizard, so that you can use that and configure it in a standard way. Manually if you do, you can do, it will be helpful for doing automation and all. But if you are doing it manually, means normal directly in the server, use YAST. Now moving ahead, as in the previous topic I was speaking about bond modes, right? The active backup. So what is this bond modes? The bond modes are nothing but it specifies a bonding policy. For cluster you should use active passive if you are using bond, and there are many other options available also, but you need to keep in mind that if you are using some other option for your bond configuration, in that case you may need to do the required configuration changes on the switch end also, and sometimes some switches don't support all these modes. So if you are planning to use some other mode, always check the compatibility with the network switch also before proceeding with that. But if you are using active backup, it doesn't require any kind of special configuration changes in the switch side. So there are following few bond modes, as I was telling you already. You know about active backup. There are some other like balance, other active backup, balance XOR, broadcast. So there are different types of bond modes. So these are not as of now not required for cluster configuration. If you are interested to know, you can probably check in the man page, or you can check in the documentation for SUSE network section, so that you will know what is this balance. So you can know balance means it will be like load balancing features, and broadcast, like it will be doing broadcasting on all the interfaces, so like that. So if you want to know more in details, please check in the documentation. Now moving ahead, how you will select the bond modes in YAST. As I was telling you, it's very easy. In the slave tab, you go and select the drop down list from the required bond mode. So you'll see all the bond modes are there, like active backup or balance or this, all those things, broadcast. So here one more thing you need to remember, if you are using YAST, one advantage you get for this MII mode, which is by default set to 0, YAST always goes and override that with 100 value. So what is this MII mode? MII mode is nothing but it is a technique which specifies the link monitoring frequency in milliseconds. So like link monitoring means here you have multiple slaves under the bond, right? So it defines how often it will go and check the status of each slave to understand if there is any failure happens. So as I was telling you, right, YAST set the MII mode value to 100. So that means every 100 milliseconds it will go and check the status of all the slaves. Now if you put it 0, that means it will not go and check. So better always set it to some value to check for the link failures. Now once you are done with network side, means you done with network configuration and bond configuration and selecting proper bond modes, you need to keep it tab on the time synchronization. Why time synchronization is important? If you are following my tutorial series on the cluster, you already know time synchronization is very important in cluster. All the nodes should be in the same time sync, else the cluster will not function properly, right? So it is required for cluster operation, and you need to keep in mind this time synchronization must be automated. So you can do that using NTP protocol, and here NTP is nothing but network time protocol. This protocol helps you to sync your time from a centralized server, so that all the nodes will be same time zone and time will be reflecting there. So it helps you to correct the time and track time variation. So it will also help you to track how much variation is happening in that time, and it also automatically adjust system time drifts. And also suppose if you see there is a huge difference, it will not directly change. Like suppose your system time is showing 10:30 am but actual time is 11:40 am, so it will not directly jump from 10:30 to 11:40. It will go in small increments. So like 10:30 to 10:32, 35, 37, like that it will go to 11:40 and then it will stop. So it does that adjustment in a small chunks. And if you are planning to have NTP configured on the cluster nodes, so have a outbound policy added into your firewall to UDP port 123. So this 123 port number is for NTP protocol, and NTP uses UDP, not TCP. And one more thing you need to keep in mind, your time source must be fault tolerant. So you cannot use single NTP server. So if that server goes down, then your cluster nodes will not get time synced. So try to have multiple NTP sources, so that if one goes down, still your server will get it from another one. So configure NTP on SLES 15 or OpenSUSE 15, also Leap 15 if you are using. So here one change happens if you are following in SUSE, OpenSUSE 12 or previous version. So what happens there, NTPD was the service behind NTP time synchronization, but in the latest version SUSE 15 it is Cronny. So some components of Cronny is like Cronny D, this is the daemon or service behind this particular service, and Cronny C. So this is like command line interface which helps you to monitor and configure the time synchronization at the run time. So there are two components, Cronny D that is a daemon and Cronny C that is a command line interface. Now once you are done with time synchronization, let's move ahead with the next important component to prepare your node for cluster deployment, that is name resolution. So name resolution here is required for your cluster nodes, and please keep in mind this is not external name resolution. It's not like from some other node you are resolving the name for your cluster nodes, but it is for internal use. So this must be reliable and can be maintained by cluster administrator. If it is maintained by cluster administrator, then well and good, then your cluster will be working and all the entries will be created as per the requirements. Why this is more important? Because all the cluster nodes will be communicating with each other with the defined name. So have it in a reliable way. So there are two options to have the name resolution. One is local host files on each node, that is etc hosts, or have a centralized DNS server. So now if you are using etc host file, some advantages are there. There is no single point of failure because each server has their own set of copy for etc host. So if that goes, so only one node will be impacted, not all the nodes. Then for this thing you no need to make any firewall configuration changes required because it's internal, and cluster administrator can manage it, so you no need to rely on some other team, some other guide to create the entries or modify the entries or delete the entries. You can directly do it by yourself. And as I was telling, no reliance on the team who manages DNS because you are using your local copy. So here few things to consider. First thing, changes need to be managed across multiple cluster nodes. Now suppose you have 4 node cluster, so if you are making change in etc host in one single server, same change has to be added into other 3 nodes also, else there will be a mismatch. So keep that in mind. So for that you can use csync2. You can add this etc host file in the csync2 configuration file and then just do csync, so that it will sync the same file on other cluster nodes also. So here one thing you need to keep in mind, using etc host file is recommended method for name resolution within the cluster. It is more reliable than DNS. Now if you are planning to use DNS, so there are few advantages, few disadvantages. So advantage is like it is centrally managed service and it's provided by network or compute team. You no need to do the changes on each node, so you do it in one place and it will be propagated to all the nodes. So that is the advantage you get, but disadvantages are also there. Few considerations you need to require planning to ensure DNS service is not a single point of failure. So at least you should have 2 DNS server or high availability in the DNS service so that it doesn't go down, and you need to make some changes in firewall to connect to the DNS server. So that required policies, port 53, that is the port number for DNS, you need to allow that so that your cluster nodes can communicate with the DNS server. And if you are using a centralized DNS, so most of the time it is outside the cluster administrator scope, so there will be a separate team who manages this DNS entry, so you have to rely on them. And one thing here you need to do, you need to configure the etc host file also, and then configure that NS switch to use DNS first and then host file second, else it will go and check in host file, and if the entry is there it will not go to DNS. So that changes you have to make, and to do this you need to put some more extra efforts to configure the cluster nodes, because if you are having suppose 4 node cluster, each node you have to go and make these changes. But this is only one time change, is not like every time you have to make this change. So one time you do it on each node and forget about it. But that extra effort you have to put for the DNS name resolution. Now once you are done with name resolution, let's move ahead with the next important topic for preparing the node, that is user management. Why you need to consider on the user management also? Because cluster needs a user account to function. So if that user account is not available, we have a problem. So when you will do that installation, you will see we are creating one user for cluster, mostly that is HA cluster user. So that's why we need proper user management for cluster to work properly. There are two options for getting that user. Either you create a local user on each node. So this HA cluster is telling, so you create this HA cluster on each node and then proceed with the cluster installation, or you have this user managed from some central manage provider, like you go ahead with AD or NIS or centralized LDAP authentication, you use that option. So there are few advantages and disadvantages for each option. So let's see on that. So if you are going ahead with local account, there are few advantages, like you will not have any single point of failure because each server has their own account. So it's not, if that user is affected in one server, it will not get impacted in other servers also. And these accounts are accessible even if the network is down, because authentication is happening locally and you no need to have any firewall configuration to allow this authentication to work. Few consideration you need to keep in mind. So management of these accounts are across multiple nodes. So like if you are having 16 node cluster, so each 16 node cluster you have to have this HA cluster user created and managed properly in all these nodes. So that is sometimes tedious work, and you should have a defined process in place to ensure consistency. Like this HA cluster should have same password or that password updated in the cluster configuration, so that it can communicate with all the cluster nodes. So if someone comes without knowing the proper process behind that, he may spoil the entire cluster operation. So you should have a proper defined policy in place to have a consistency. Now if you don't want to have a local account, you can have a centrally managed account. So there also you have few advantages, disadvantages. Advantages like it is centrally managed, so simple to manage, you no need to go and manage it on each server. You do it in one place and it will get updated in all other nodes. Add and configure the account is in one place, so that's advantages. But there are few considerations. So first consideration is like you need to have an extra effort to set up the centralized authentication. So both from the centralized authentication perspective, like you need to create a LDAP server or AD or NIS server, so that you need to set up, and similarly you have to configure the cluster nodes which will be acting as a client for the centralized authentication service. So that configuration you need to make before proceeding with the cluster installation. Then second thing, single point of failure, because you are getting it from a single centralized place. So if that is down, all the servers will not be able to access these accounts. So it is a single point of failure. Now if you want to mitigate the single point of failure, you have to again put a extra effort, and that will make it more complex, but you have to do that to mitigate that single point of failure. And management of the accounts could be outside of cluster team, as I was telling you. If you are doing it on AD, Active Directory, so mostly Windows team will be managing that. So Linux team who manages these clusters will not be able to manage these users. So yeah, they have to rely on that Windows team. And you need to make some changes on the firewall also to communicate with the centralized authentication servers from your cluster node. So that extra effort you have to put. Once you are done with your file system, infrastructure, network, time synchronization, name resolution and accounts, you have to put your thought while designing on the software management part. That is also important. You should have a uniform software base in all the cluster nodes. So this software version control is essential, and all your cluster nodes should run the same software version. So only time you can differ from this policy when you are doing a patching. During patching you may have a different version on the node. Suppose you have 3 node cluster, one node you take it out and do the patching, so that time that node will be in higher version compared to your other nodes. So only that time it is approved and allowed. Other time if you are having a different software version on each node, SUSE will not support it, or cluster also will not support that. That is not an ideal situation for your software versions. So good software management is a good practice. So for having a good software management and proper patching on the cluster nodes, so you can have few configuration use options. So one thing, you can directly connect to the SUSE software center and download it. In case of OpenSUSE, it is like directly to that repository you connect and download it, or else you set up a local SUSE manager for your environment and then get patches from there, or you can set up SMT, RMT server or local HTTP repository. Even you can use RHEL satellite server also, or you can have a spacewalk or some third party patching server. So here one thing you need to keep in mind, I will not suggest you to directly connect to the SUSE customer center, because there are few things. It is like directly you are connecting to internet, so you have to have internet allowed, so that's the security loophole you are leaving. So better not to directly connect to the internet. Second thing, you have no control over these repositories. So if you are doing, suppose first you should do on test node and then you should move to the production, right? By the time you do test node, maybe first week of your month, and by the time you do your production is like last week of your month. So when you do last week of your month patching for your production server, you may see like newer version compared to your test server what you installed there. So that control you will not have. So to have that control, same version tested on the test environment and then implemented on production environment, to have that, either you use SUSE manager where you can sync and then stop the sync and then apply the same patches in all the servers, then again resync, or same thing you can do it using SMT, RMT. SUSE manager, if you are using, that extra license you have to purchase, but in case of SMT or RMT server, no extra license, it comes with standard SUSE only, so you can set it up. And local HTTP repository also you can do that. Problem is you cannot have the automated sync, so every time you want to sync your packages, you have to manually sync it and put it in the HTTP repository. So that is a manual effort. Satellite, again, good solution, but this is from Red Hat, and here also some extra configuration is required, and you can, here also you can have that control. You can have separate branches for each software so that you install it on the different places. But for RHEL satellite you have to have a license. If you don't want to purchase any license, you can probably go with Spacewalk, where you can have the similar kind of concept, and you can have it for multiple operating systems like SUSE, Red Hat, CentOS, so everything you can connect with Spacewalk. So but you should have that configuration done for proper software management. So now once you are done with your software management configuration doing, then you have to have the update the cluster node. So there are two scenarios for updating. One is like upgrading to another version of SUSE high availability OS. So here one thing can be done like major release update, like you are going from SUSE 12 to SUSE 15, so that's called major update. Or you go ahead with service pack, like you are going with like 15.1 to 15.2, so that's like a service pack upgrade. So this is one scenario where your OS version is getting changed. Another scenario is you are only updating the individual packages, like you are in the same service pack 2 and you are just updating the packages. So that also can be scenario. So these two scenarios you can face while doing a update. So to do that, you have to prepare your cluster nodes properly for an upgrade. So before you do upgrade, you have to take care of some few things like backup. Take a backup, that is a failback mechanism. If you have something failures, you can restore it back from the backup. If you are using virtual machines, so take a snapshot, and then if you face some issues, you can roll back using the snapshot. And always test the backup and be sure that you can restore from that backup. not enough just to take a backup. You just take a backup and leave it, it's not a good idea, because during the crisis you may see like that backup is not sufficient to restore. So always test your backup and see whether can you restore from it. So next thing you always do, that you test your upgrade on a staging instance of the cluster. Don't directly apply the patches on production, because you never know whether that will break your system or not, or your application will misbehave because of that patching. So always have a staging instance pre-prod section where you first test these patches, test it thoroughly, all the functionalities and everything. Once you are sure that okay, this patch is not going to break my system and is only enhancing, then only go and apply the same patches on the production. So never ever directly apply the patches on production, and this will give you an indication whether you have any problem or not. So don't get into a surprise of that okay, why is not working. So always test it and then apply it. So this also helps you with the time estimation. So if you are doing it on a non-prod system, you will know okay, for this patching activity how much time you will require. So then you can go back to your change management process and raise the change accordingly and communicate it to all the stakeholders, like okay, this much time it will go ahead, this much time it will be outage, this much time your service will not be accessible. So this also helps you with the time estimation, and also it helps you to prepare the run book which can be referred later while doing the production upgrade. So nothing will be surprise steps, because already you have tested it on staging instance. So that's all for now. Hope this helps you to understand how you will prepare your infrastructure for cluster nodes and then go ahead with the cluster implementation. So thank you for watching this lengthy video. I know this is a little bit lengthy, you may lose the flow in between, but if you can follow the video, it will be, I hope it will be helpful for you. So if you have liked this video, please subscribe to my TreachTech Institute YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed yet, if you already subscribed, so thank you for that. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe it. Also, if you like the video, please press the like button and share it with your friends, colleagues and family members, so that they can also watch it and they can also learn from it, and also I can grow from that. Also, if you don't like it, please use the comment section also to let us know why you didn't like, what improvement you thought we can make. So that also put it there, so that will be helpful for us and we can make it accordingly in our next videos. So thanks again, bye, have a good day, we'll see you in our next video.